All right, well, welcome to the Pollinator Park. We're live streaming, and this is our Earth Day event today. So thanks for coming, everybody. We have a big crowd today, too, of course.
Too many.
Wow. I'm just going to give a very quick tour of the Pollinator Park, and then we have a couple of mini science talks immediately following. So this park was established in 2014 by the Pollinator Friendly Alliance. The land is owned by the city of Stillwater, but they weren't doing anything with it. So it's just a couple of underutilized lots, and it's a perfect opportunity to put some habitat in, which is very much in need for biodiversity, our pollinators and wildlife. So this was the first area that we worked on, which was planted in 2014 and 2015. We call this the upper prairie. It's a short grass prairie. Prairie restorations provided the seed. Instead, we put a coconut establishing blanket down and seeded it in the late fall. The prairie first came up the following spring, and this is the 6th year of this prairie. It's well established. Down here is the second prairie we put in. We call that the lower prairie. It's also a short grass prairie, and that was installed with Minnesota Native Landscapes. It's a similar mix, but different. It's a little bit more for a wetter environment, and also very course. So this is the 3rd year of this prairie, and the 3rd year is supposed to be the year when the flowers actually bloom.
The breakout.
The breakout?
Breakout year.
The breakout year. So we're excited to see what we get this year in the lower prairie. Along the slope is a mass of milkweed, all different species of milkweed. There are 6 native milkweed species in Minnesota, and there are 3 represented here, along with a lot of other flower species, including lobelia and bee balm, and mountain mint. So the 3rd and 4th habitats are over here, and this is different than the prairie in that it does not include any grasses. It's always also very packed in. The flowers that are represented here include penstemon, liatris, sedum, autumn joy sedum, anise hyssop, vervain, and lobelia, joe pye weed, coreopsis. It's packed full of flowers. So just trimmed down the garden today. We wanted to wait until the end of April to cut the stiff stems because bees like to overwinter in stiff stems or underground or in piles of mulch or other untidy areas in your garden. So we ask people not to clean their gardens until end of April, first part of May. And when the warm weather came, most of the bees and wasps and pollinators emerged. So I think we're safe to cut them down now. We have 2 other speakers. Matt, do you feel ready?
Sure. Thank you for being here, everyone. Oh, we got a couple more coming. Thanks to anyone joining online or at a later time. We're glad that you're with us virtually. My name's Matt Lagus. I work for the University of Minnesota and also with PFA, and I study the effects of pesticides on native pollinators, specifically butterflies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about butterflies today. and pesticides. There was a study this winter. It came out. The Xerces Society counts monarch butterflies every year, and there was a count of the West Coast population for the U.S., which 20 years ago they was over 1 million butterflies they counted. The past couple of years, it's been in the tens of thousands, and this year they counted only 2,000 butterflies. So it looks like the population west of the Rockies could very well go extinct within the next couple of years. And so there are all these questions that scientists are trying to figure out about why is this happening. Big one that we know of is habitat destruction. And we need more habitat for monarchs, whether that's during the summer, nectar plants and milkweed, and then overwintering sites in Mexico and in California and in some other places. But what I've done with my work is I study pesticides. And so I'll just tell you guys a little bit about what we've been finding, how pesticides affect monarchs, and then kind of what we can do going forward. So basically what we're seeing is that how pesticides work is the common phrase is the label is the law. So whatever the rate it says on a pesticide label, that's what is legal to apply. The problem with that is there's a lot that we don't know about how toxic things are, if those rates, how those rates actually apply to lots of different organisms. So a lot of the pesticides that are used were registered before we really had any knowledge of what is toxic to monarchs. And what we're starting to find is that the rates that are on the labels are actually very toxic, can be very toxic to monarchs. And even beyond that, what's toxic to a monarch, even if it doesn't kill a butterfly, it can still have effects at much lower concentrations. Like we've found, even compared to the rate that kills butterflies, even 100 times lower than that, it can still have negative effects. So basically there's a lot of learning to be done, but we're starting to see that pesticides might be playing a pretty big role in what's happening to monarchs. And so going forward, what can we do? There's a lot to be said about habitat and what plants we can plant, where we can restore habitat, native prairie, milkweed, how we can work the US with Canada and with the Mexican government as well to provide a continuous corridor for monarchs to migrate. But one big action step that we can take right now as a community in Minnesota is reaching out to legislators, because there are some key bills related to pollinators that are going through the legislature right now. There are a couple related to pesticides, and if you want to learn more about those, you can find out more on PFA's website. But that would be the biggest action step that I would encourage people to take today when it relates to pesticides, because we are seeing that pesticides can have a significant effect on butterflies in ways that we didn't even know. I think it was 2015 was the first monarch pesticide paper that was really published. And since then we've had about a dozen or so, and there's still so much to learn. But yeah, one great step is to reach out to legislators to encourage them to support these bills protecting pollinators. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Hi everyone bundled up here and cozy at home. I'm a little envious right now. Thank you all for coming to this event. My name is Jess. I am a volunteer for the Pollinator Friendly Alliance. I also have a bachelor's degree in biology. I have done research on honeybees, and this fall I began a PhD program studying bumblebees. I'm really excited about all insects, but especially pollinators. So today we're going to be talking about a pollinator that has kind of a bad reputation, and that is wasps. Everyone, I think, at some point in their lives has felt fear of wasps, myself included, but I think the best cure for fear is curiosity. So we're going to be curious about wasps, and we're going to talk about why they're important. So to start out, we're going to go over some basics, including differentiating them from bees. Wasps, like bees, vary a lot from species to species, but the ones that we're most familiar with in this region look a lot like the bees that we're used to. So we'll talk about a few different ways to tell the difference. Bees, this is kind of your standard honeybee here. Bees tend to be fuzzy or hairy, while wasps tend to be more smooth. And bees tend to have more round bodies, especially those bumblebees that we're so used to around here, where wasps tend to be more cylindrical, more narrow, and have a really small little waist. So those are some good ways to keep track of which is which. Next, I want to give you some basic information about wasps. It is estimated that there are at least 30,000 different species, although some estimates are over 100,000. They come in every color imaginable. And I've got some pictures here. These ones are all found in this region, and you can kind of see how different they all are in colors and shapes and sizes. They're all so different. So while we are mostly used to the yellow jackets and sometimes the hornets, they really are all so different from each other. Can you see? Let's see. They all live in nests. A lot of them are made of wood pulp, which has kind of that papery texture. The majority of species are actually solitary. So while we have species that we're really used to around here that live in big colonies, that's not really standard for most wasps. Most of them are solitary, which is actually true for bees as well. Let's see. In the social colonies, just like bees, there's one egg-laying queen and a whole bunch of workers. So that's how that social hierarchy works. The majority of wasp species are also stingless. So most of them cannot sting you, although the ones that we're most familiar with, of course, as we know, like the yellow jackets and the hornets, they can sting you, sometimes repeatedly, if they feel threatened, but most species can't sting at all. As far as behavior goes, they're actually really intelligent. In social colonies, they can learn to recognize each other's faces, and wasps can actually be taught to detect drugs and explosives like we teach dogs to do. So they're really intelligent. For food, most wasps eat nectar and other sweet things like fruit juices, which is why they're so interested in when you have juice or a soda or something, they're going to be really excited about that. There are also wasps that eat plant matter, and there are some that are predators that eat other insects and spiders. Typically, even if the adults are vegetarian, they're still going to need to collect insects to feed to their babies as a protein source. So often wasps have very specific diets. For example, there's a species of wasp that only hunts cicadas. There's another species that will only hunt queen ants, not workers, not males, only queens, specifically queens that still have their wings attached. So that's really specific and really complex and pretty impressive, actually. But this insect eating behavior actually brings us to one of the most important ecological roles that they play. Nearly every pest insect, such as like caterpillars, aphids, and flies, are preyed upon by wasps, either for food or as a host for their parasitic larvae. Wasps are so good at controlling pest populations that farmers will actually deploy wasps in their crop fields to keep their crops safe. So kind of like a natural pesticide. But this is important for every ecosystem, not just farms. So in your gardens or just in general, if it weren't for wasps keeping the herbivore insects in check, that would have a huge effect on all of our plant populations, which of course affects everything else as well. And although wasps aren't often thought of as pollinators, they are. They may not be as efficient as bees, but they still can pollinate. And they're really important to a ton of plants, including milkweed and orchids. The most fun example, in my opinion, is figs. Figs are a keystone species in many tropical ecosystems, and wasps are the only pollinator for like 1,000 species of figs. So without wasps, we wouldn't have figs. Each species of fig has a specific species of wasp that pollinates that species. And the wasps also need the figs, so the need is totally mutual. The life cycle begins when a female wasp bores into a fig, which isn't really a fruit so much as a collection of tiny flowers inverted with a skin on the outside. So the female will burrow in, she will lay her eggs inside the fig, and then when the eggs hatch, the male larvae fertilize the female larvae. And the males are born blind and wingless, and their only other job in life is to tunnel out of the fig and leave a little tunnel, and then they die. And then the females will use that tunnel to leave the fig, and they're fertilized, so they want to go lay their eggs. So they bring the pollen from the original fig that they were born in, they bring that to the next fig where they lay their eggs. So that pollinates the figs, and the wasps benefit as well. So the next time you eat a fig Newton, remember to thank a wasp. And actually, we should be thanking wasps for all of the important things that they do. So I encourage you to stop and observe wasps the way that you may stop and observe a bee or a butterfly, and embrace your curiosity, not your fear. So I do have a little diagram for the people at home and the people here. And you can see pictures of these figs with their little tiny wasps. They're super, super small. So that's pretty crazy. I encourage you to look into it. It's very fascinating. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, otherwise that is all I have.